welcome back. This is the Points and Parries podcast. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode here. We're just getting together to briefly talk about a rule set that we've been working on for competitive longsword, and an opportunity that we've got to run that rule set in an official way now. Something we've been testing, but we're pretty excited that we will be running this at Midlands Madness. And what was the exact date? I think it's May 3rd.
It's the first weekend of May.
Yeah, first we'll pull that up for this, but it's coming up soon.
hmm
And that was a fun event last year. And we'll talk more about the arrangement we made with Bo in a moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
basically looking forward to running it. So, Wook, you just kind of want to give a brief description of the rule set as it stands?
Well, before I get into the exact rules themselves, because I think people are going to be less interested in that, as
Maybe.
opposed to why we think that we have something cool here. And I mean, I compete quite a bit. In a year, I think last year I went a little bit more than 10 different HEMA events.
Oh, nice.
Um, I think maybe only a third of them were HEMA rated, or maybe half were HEMA rated. I
Sure.
don't remember. But so I fenced under a lot of different rule sets, and so I was getting a feel of the kinds of the things that were annoying fencers, things that were that could have been improved on from like a judging perspective, and then the most recent thing is like from a spectator's perspective. Um, I had last year I went to Raleigh Open and I had a blast fencing under their semi-continuous format. So I fenced under it when it was more continuous, and then last year they made it more semi-continuous, and I thought that that was a really fine way to go about it. Um, for like safety reasons, in a lot of just full-on continuous formats, people just get riled up and they're just continuously going at it, right? And so I thought the rules for Raleigh Open was good in a semi-continuous format, but I felt like there was a bit of transparency that was lacking, right? The way they had it, they had multiple judges, like I think it was four different judges, all of them
Sure.
with different clickers, and all of them had
Mhm.
sort of a different idea of who won the exchange by the end of the match. And so I wanted to sort of catapult it off of that idea, but made it more transparent, make it easier for judges to judge, and also for like spectators to enjoy. I think uh, in order to help popularize HEMA, making the matches exciting and easy to understand should be a part
Right.
of
Right.
any rule set that we come up with.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. Like you look at, I mean, rule sets have changed a lot. Some of them are easier to understand than others, but trying to explain, something like long point rules, and I always really enjoyed that rule set as a competitor. But like trying
hmm
to like tell somebody what's going on, it's not super clear. So yeah, that's a good point I hadn't even thought of. Is just kind of uh, for somebody outside of HEMA to be able to look at it and figure out what's going on is
hmm
a great benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the same. I mean, I think you and I share a lot of similar goals. It's been fun to work with you on this. We probably differ in some places, but it's we're aligned where it matters. I'm not like looking for a big unified rule set for like all of America, but I think it would be fun to have something like this that's simple and in place and people could use,
hmm
and we can use to run multiple events, something that we could have judges understand quickly. Judging quality is like a really big thing for me. It's really easy to come up with a super complex rule set, and it looks good on paper, but your judges are confused and inconsistent. So really, the goal for me in this project, as also an active competitor and somebody that's really enjoyed participating and following in competitive HEMA, is just to have something that competitors know they can show up to
hmm
and feel like they're in good hands, and like feel like the person who won that day was the best fencer, hopefully, that showed up, and
Right.
uh, just kind of like minimize if everything works right. Like we'll be learning, but I think we're setting ourselves up for a
Yeah.
rule set where we can run events where people feel like they're in good hands, that things didn't come down to judging mistakes,
Right.
and
And
that they knew what was expected of them, and they can just kind of like fence right,
mhm.
and not worry about all that stuff. So
Yeah, the idea that judges make mistakes, and it's just a human thing. The swords are moving at incredibly fast speeds,
Right.
and I will sometimes miss things, and I do a ton of judging, right? And so that's part of that is built into the rule set where we try to have uh, it's a semi-continuous format, so it should wash out where you're going to have a lot more exchanges than you normally would in a
Right.
tournament. You're going to have a lot more individual exchanges, and then you're going to have a lot more just fights overall because we're going to do two sets of pools and a double elimination bracket. So just overall in general, you're going
Right.
to be fighting quite a bit
And
more.
talk more about that because I think that's something that we both felt was important with this rule set, and it's something that I'm surprised isn't emphasized more. And different events go for different things, right?
Hmm.
Like I think of like Surfo as a great event. I always feel like I'm in good hands with the judges, but their goal is on running like a lot of different tournaments so that
Hmm.
somebody, if you have this variety of Renaissance weapons you're interested in, you can go and sort of express all of those, but you might get fewer exchanges in an individual tournament. I think it was important for us to like maximize to make it sort of a one weapon tournament. We're doing these at first for longsword, but the rule set's not specifically for longsword,
Right.
or doesn't have to be. But why do you think it's important to like have so many exchanges and so many matches, other than the fact that's what you showed up to do and it's fun?
Well, in any individual exchange where you have a bunch of complex rules and just having a judge, like whether it's one judge out of a group of four, which I think a group of four of judges is one of the worst, but that's a different thing. I think we give a lot of power to the judges, right? Especially if you go into a tournament and you might max fighting against somebody, have like five exchanges with that person, and one of that exchange gets washed out for whatever reason, and then another one of the exchange gets miscalled against you, and it's like just it's such a huge uphill battle at that point, right? And so I wanted to kind of eliminate giving judges so much power, but without neutering judges, if that
Or
makes sense.
like the power to make a mistake every now and then. I think without it ruining a match, right?
Right.
Um, I think it's just kind of simple math. Like outliers happen, flukes happen. The best fencer in the world can lose an exchange to the worst fencer in the
Hmm.
world in certain, on any day in front of any judge. Whether it's a judging mistake, maybe it's just a fluke. Maybe he made a bad decision and got hit, or he doubled, and on some level that's interesting from a martial arts perspective because we realize that like swords would be dangerous, and you would always be at risk no matter how good you got with one. But after you understand that that's not a really interesting idea to build a tournament around. Like I don't really love like sudden death tournaments,
Yeah. Yeah.
for that reason. Like you go against somebody and like, yeah, like the sword feels sharp in a way that like if you goof up a little bit, you're gonna get hit and lose the match. And
Hmm.
on some level that's interesting, but to me, like once you've done it one time, that's kind of it. That's the idea. And it's much more exciting to me to watch two people who've worked really hard on their fencing skill set to go against each other, to make adjustments, to
Hmm.
explore tactics, strategy, to make changes from match to match, from exchange to exchange.
Right.
And when you have more matches and more exchanges, people regress to the mean, and you ideally get a result that's more indicative of sorting out which fencer is better, right?
Right.
So that's kind of why I like that, and
Hmm.
I think the way that we're running it and the way that it's come out in testing is that with it semi-continuous, it's not a truly continuous rule set in the sense that like the fencers aren't breaking each other like apart and then going right back into it like you'd see in a boxing match. You're still waiting for a director instruction to begin, but it moves along really quickly. It's designed to
Hmm.
be fluid and not to spend a lot of time on deliberation and like he did an undercut here. There's a pair,
Right.
back and forth,
Right.
which
It
is
it needed to be that sort of pace, but it also needed to have judges still sort of show exactly what they thought happened in the exchange,
Right.
right? So we're removing the judge's ability to speak out. The director's the one doing most of the speaking, but the judges will still be using motions to motion, the actions that they thought they saw, right?
Right.
And then I think more crucially, I think one of the biggest differentiator between ours and the way other people do it is that we're counting every single judge's call individually and then totaling that up in real time.
Right. Instead of the traditional model is more of like a consensus, and maybe, I mean, people do it different ways, but generally, like the director looks around and either adds that up, or he uses them as an extra set of eyes and makes the decision they think is right. Which
Right.
is, if you have a great director, it's a great match, but if you have a bad director, it's a bad match. But
Mm-hmm.
we're sort of counting each of the judges' calls individually. So if you have a clear action, both judges are more likely to agree on what they saw, and you'll be rewarded sort of organically just through the system of judging it that way, not through
Mm-hmm.
any real like. Well, I say that we also we'll get to it. We can get to it now if we want. Actually, there is a benefit built into the rules for judge agreement, but even before that kind of tacked on benefit, like doing clear exchanges and having the judges in an agreement is something that the fencers in this rule set should seek to do, and will be rewarded and win more matches if they can get those clean exchanges. But if you want to
Right.
talk about the
Sure.
clean hit point,
So I wanted to be agnostic to sources. I didn't want to favor any one particular source in HEMA than any other. There are some sources that say you should hit hands more. Some sources says you should hit heads more. Some sources say that you should do everything you can to do a revenge strike, et cetera, et cetera. And the way I think of it is that uh, every target is equally valuable, and then it's what happens after you initiate, right? Is sort of what a lot of people start to get confused up on. And so because every target is only worth 1 point, we're saying that if you get afterblowed, then the person who afterblowed, will also receive a point.
right? It's sort of like almost like a Nordic type system where we're not super focused on tempo. We're focused more on who hit.
Right, right. And same thing with doubles. If you both double, you both get 1 point, right?
Right.
And what crucially matters is that if one judge sees it as a hit and an afterblow, and then the other judge sees it as just a hit, and maybe they thought that the afterblow was of low quality, they would have motioned it, or if they thought that the afterblow was late, right? From their point of view, and so that judge would only reward to the initial attacker, and so the initial attacker ends up getting 2 points because we're counting both judges, while the other fencer still gets that 1 point from that judge. I'm hoping that fencer psychology kicks in, and fencers see that, hey, at least I'm still getting something out of that exchange, and they're not going to just ramp up and go crazy on the very next one in hopes that they're going to get a hit in faster than
Yeah, I mean, and you and I, there's what can I debate rule and game design productively, I think, pretty much every day. And I think you and I probably think a little bit differently about that, but
mm-hmm,
the outcome is the same. That I think you're hoping that the fencer feels like they still got a point, and they're encouraged by that. To me, it's 1 point either way, so it sort of washes mechanically in the rules, but it you're like you're not going to pull ahead unless you're getting more points than the other person at some point during the match.
right,
But uh, we're using, and the reason why we're tracking those anyway, from my perspective, is that it allows us to do things like look at hits against when we split up when we seed into our eliminations and things like that. So it's still important to be counting touches with a sword to me.
right,
But just as real simple terms, because I feel like I hope we're not being too cryptic about the rules when this comes on video. It's 1 point for a hit,
mm-hmm,
right? And if both judges agree, first off, you get 2 points, right? Because they both saw a hit and they both scored a point. And if they both agree and it was clean, you would get an extra point. That's fundamentally that's the rule set, right? I
Yeah,
mean, is there anything super important that I'm missing there? There's no real control point. There's no real weighted like afterblow system or anything like that. It's
nope.
in ultimate. I mean, you really need to be perceived by most of the judges or perceived most of the time to be hitting without being hit back to pull
Mhm.
ahead and win. And that's the thing that's rewarded here.
That's the thing that people would have questions on is the way we do grappling. So I wanted
Sure,
to
sure, sure.
prioritize the kind of fencing that I like to see, and that's primarily done with blade actions. And I'm not saying you can't grapple, but I am saying that if you get into a situation where you are grappling, it needs to end with a blade action. And then we really, and you were the one who pushed for this, but we really award disarms, and it has to be like an intentional disarm and not some sort of, beat their blade out of the way, or
Right, or
they
somebody
stab you
dropped
or the
something
sword
in a
drops.
messy
Yeah,
exchange.
it needs
Yeah.
to be like a an actual, you went to disarm and you grabbed it and pulled it away from them, and that's probably the biggest reward points you get. That's 4 points.
Which we put that in there. We haven't seen much disarming in playtesting, and I predict
or
that we
or in
we
general
we
for all of,
probably
I
won't
watch a
see it.
lot of HEMA footage, and
Right, right,
disarms are
right.
rare.
We won't see it. I think even very often in this rule set, but generally when you have both of so the grappling rules are that you're allowed to do wrestling at the sword until it gets silly or something that we call sort of the same standard you usually see. We're not doing a count. Um, but it's just 1 point when you do the sword action. Like it's there's no special reward for being able to come in. We're not really encouraging grappling. It's just something that if it's in your skill set and at the moment of fencing, if it makes sense and that's the way that you would win that exchange, you're welcome to use it and get your point that way. With the exception of the grappling is actually or I'm sorry, the disarm is the most points you could get, being 4.
Hmm.
Because I do think that is martially probably the one of the most skillful things that a fencer can demonstrate, even though it's rarely done. So I think the reward is good. It's there if you can get extra points for like dunking on somebody and taking their sword away. But I don't think we'll see it super often. But that I think that makes an interesting situation. You get into a grapple, it's going to be what you're used to wrestling at the sword. It's likely easier to just score a hit. Um, but if you're like Arto Fama and you can take the sword away, you're going to get a lot of points. So that option is there for people who specialize in that sort of thing.
Right.
And
Um,
the one-handed strike rules, I think, are important. That's a sort of interesting caveat. I think we put right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, we're basically not rewarding it, right? I mean, not below so I mean, frankly, I don't like to see a lot of Geislings in tournament rule sets, so that's kind of what started this. Um, I agree with that Sean Franklin article pretty much whole cloth. I think it does things to the fencing that aren't particularly interesting. I would hate to be hit with a sharp sword in the shin in a sword fight, and I do think that fencers should learn how to deal with it. But for this rule set, um, we're not going to allow it.
Yeah.
And
So one of my main arguments against it is if you watch a lot of competition footage, and when it comes down to like this is the last exchange and they're really close, just watch how the audience reacts if that ends in a one-handed action.
Sure,
People hate it. There's
yeah,
always
yeah,
going
yeah.
to be boos. There's always going to be groans, and
I've
that
lost two
alone is
matches
enough.
to them, and I don't. I mean, it makes me disappointed in myself because you should be able to deal with it as a fencer, but that's yeah, it's not particularly interesting to me. I don't know, and I think it shifts the measure, right? I think it makes
Mhm.
people fence cautiously and farther back. And in a rule set where you're already dealing with like these 1 point exchanges, what we don't want it to turn into is kind of one of these like super risk averse, like far back only seeking hand strikes. We want to reward people who have the ability to get in closer and strike to those deep targets still. Like, and if if you can do that, if you can get a lockout thrust, you're getting points. You're not getting hit back. You're going to get three.
Right.
But I think that the one-handed strikes push fencers farther away and make the measure a bit more nervous. So to me, it actually reduces the likelihood of those really exciting, like bold fencing actions that we want to see.
Hmm.
And you just people get hit in the shin really hard. They get hurt. I didn't throw guy slings for years, and they're pretty prevalent in the meta now. And I threw one last event, and it hurt the other fencer. It made me feel terrible.
Yeah.
Glad to not see them in this rule set. But we're open to feedback from people as they're playing with this.
Yeah.
Whether they like them or hate them, we're going to see how it goes. In testing, it's been good to eliminate them, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think at this point we've done a pretty good job at explaining um, our goals for the rule set and the particulars of it. I guess before we end, I want to say, what's your dream for this?
Well, my so short-term dream is again as this goes out, we're running this at Midland Madness, and we are very thankful that Bo is letting us run a tournament using this rule set there. So please, everybody, show up. It's going to be a good tournament. We hope it's going to be rated. We are taking the idea of you being in good hands as a competitor very, very, very seriously. We want you to be able to show up and really fence and feel like if you won, you won. Long term, I think we're looking hopefully to expand this into a few different tournaments in the region. Maybe have like a collection of events. We are not like right now looking to use this to run some sort of like giant once a year event. It's more how can we fill out the schedule and have
Hmm.
something that's easy to pick up that we can teach judges quickly and we can get accurate results so that people have more opportunities to fence. And
Right.
I think that's what uh, competitive HEMA needs right now. It really is just more chances to go fence.
Yeah. Um, I have always been envious of other sports. Like if you look at soccer, or you look at football, or you look at like all of them have a rule that, as a competitor, as a athlete, you specifically train for, and then you go out and you compete in them. And I'm hoping that the INDES rule set doesn't have to be the only one, but I'm hoping it becomes popular enough. If fencers really enjoy it, I want them to request it. If judges really like judging within it, right, or spectators like watching it, I want people to go out and to their local HEMA event and specifically ask, "Hey, can we run this rule set?" Um, I think if you award stuff like a real disarm with most points, and people think they can get ahead with it, then people will specifically train for it, and that would just make the exchanges look even cooler, right?
Yeah, 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 right on. No, I agree. Again, with the caveat of like, I like seeing variety in rule sets. I think, and that's one of the cool things at Midland. I mean, Bo's always experimenting. He's going to be doing his combat longsword tournament, which is sort of like his baby, separate to this. So, like, if you show up to Midlands, you still have the opportunity to participate in two longsword tournaments. Like, you can
Mm-hmm.
do something that is you're not used to, and you can prove that you're an adaptive fencer, or and you can also do this, which is a kind of like I think a pared down Titan version of the rule sets that you're used to doing, and like Wilk said, hopefully it's a rule set that fencers start thinking about and start thinking about how to perform under.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree, and I'm really looking
Excellent.
forward to it.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you guys.